My sister broke the only rule I ever gave her. She almost got my family killed, then showed up at dinner holding a glass of wine. When I asked why she wouldn't stop, she said, "He's still breathing, isn't he?" That was 10 months ago. Today, she was screaming my name through the Ring camera, begging me to stop. My sister and I always had an okay relationship at best. We never talked much, but we never fought either. We never shared clothes, never talked about boys, never did any of those sister things. Whenever it was just the two of us, the silence felt awkward, and neither of us cared enough to break it. But everything changed when she turned 21. Because the second she took her first drink, everything changed. She went from drinking once a month to once a week to every day. It was awful watching her fall deeper and deeper into it. And what made it even worse was how hard she tried to drag me down with her. I never liked alcohol. I always wanted to stay away from it. But she pressured me constantly. On her 22nd birthday, she handed me a bottle of water that was actually straight vodka. When I spit it out and started coughing, I looked up and saw her filming me and laughing. After that, I gave her one final chance. I told her that if she ever tried to force me into drinking again, I would cut her out of my life. Well, 1 month later, it was her anniversary with her boyfriend. They invited me out with them, and my sister promised she wouldn't ask me to drink. Of course, she lied. The entire night, she kept handing me heavily watered-down drinks that I didn't even realize contained alcohol. Some had vodka, some had whiskey, some even had rum. I remember feeling a slight buzz after the third drink. Then the room started spinning. It was the first time I had ever been drunk. I grabbed onto her and asked what was wrong with me. She just laughed. And because she was tipsy herself, she admitted what she had done. I don't remember exactly what she said. All I remember is being furious. I called a cab immediately. The moment I got home, I sent her a voice message telling her I never wanted to see her again. The craziest part was that a week later, she called me blaming me for ruining her party because everyone started looking at her differently after finding out why I left. I didn't even respond. I just hung up. Life moved on without her. Soon, I met the love of my life. We got engaged. We got married. My sister wasn't invited. She never even tried to reach out. But then, when I was pregnant, she suddenly messaged me. She said she had seen my Facebook post about the baby through one of her friend's accounts, and seeing it made her realize that nothing mattered more than family. She apologized. She begged for another chance. I was extremely reluctant, but eventually I agreed. We met for coffee at a small brunch place, and even though she was polite and apologetic, she still drank 3 glasses of wine. That told me she was still drinking regularly. I asked her about it. She told me alcohol was a part of her life she never wanted to give up, but she promised that if I let her back into my life, she would never try to pressure me into drinking again. I thought about it for a long time, and eventually I agreed. I didn't know what to expect. But surprisingly, everything went fine. She respected my boundaries. She never asked me to drink, and she never got more than tipsy around me. Then last week, she came to my house. And that was the moment I realized letting her back into my life was the worst mistake I could have made. This was the first time I allowed her to visit after my baby was born. I warned her that she wasn't allowed near the baby if she had been drinking. She told me that wouldn't be a problem. I still had a bad feeling about it. But the last year had given me every reason to trust her, so I pushed those worries aside. Then she arrived carrying 2 bottles of wine. We sat together and talked. Even my husband had a glass. I didn't drink. My sister almost finished both bottles by herself. By the end of the evening, she was completely hammered. Still, everything seemed okay. Then she asked to use the bathroom. I pointed her upstairs. A few minutes later, I decided to check on her to make sure she wasn't getting sick. But when I went upstairs, she wasn't in the bathroom. She was in our bedroom, sitting on our bed, completely wasted, holding my baby. The second she saw me, she panicked and jumped to her feet. She tried to hand him back to me, but as she stood up, she lost her balance. She fell and dropped my baby. He hit the floor. I screamed and rushed to him. Thankfully, he hadn't fallen from very high. He was crying, but there didn't seem to be any serious injuries. At least none that I could see. My sister got back up and started apologizing. I called my husband. I told him to take the baby. Then I dragged my sister downstairs and outside. I told her she had broken the only rule I ever gave her. Under no circumstances was she allowed near my baby while drunk. And while drunk, she picked him up, then dropped him. She kept apologizing. But I called her a taxi and told her I never wanted to speak to her again. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Because it turned out she had done more than just drop my baby. She had given him wine from the bottle she was drinking. And while I was downstairs throwing her out, my husband was upstairs holding our son while he vomited. He was crying. My husband was crying. And he was already calling the hospital. The next few hours were a blur. An ambulance took us to the emergency room. Doctors confirmed alcohol poisoning in my infant son. They ran test after test, looking for other complications, while my husband and I paced the waiting room, terrified that we might lose our baby because of my sister's recklessness. The staff worked quickly, but the expressions on their faces did nothing to calm us down. They monitored his vitals. They took blood samples, and a hospital social worker interviewed us extensively. When we explained how our son had consumed alcohol, she looked suspicious. I could see it in her eyes. She thought we were hiding something. A mandatory child welfare investigation was opened immediately. We felt like criminals, even though we were the victims. We answered the same questions over and over again, describing everything in painful detail, while our baby received treatment in another room. I tried calling my sister repeatedly during that nightmare. She never answered. Texts were ignored. Voicemails went unheard. She simply vanished after the ambulance left. My husband had forced her out of the house, but we still expected at least one call asking if the baby was okay. Instead, nothing. And that silence only proved that deep down she knew exactly how serious what she had done really was. After a horrible night at the hospital, the doctors finally gave us good news. Our son was going to be okay. There was no permanent damage that they could detect, but they warned us that even small amounts of alcohol could potentially create developmental issues that might not appear immediately. We would need to monitor him closely, and we would need follow-up appointments. The relief almost made my knees give out. My husband and I held each other and cried, grateful that our son had escaped serious harm. The next day we brought him home, and I felt two things at the same time: relief and rage. My sister had endangered my child's life, then disappeared without taking responsibility for any of it. That afternoon, while my husband watched the baby, I drove to her apartment. I hadn't slept. I was running on pure adrenaline. My hands were white on the steering wheel as I rehearsed what I wanted to say. I needed her to understand what she had done. I pounded on her door until her boyfriend answered. He looked hungover, confused, and completely unaware of what had happened. He told me she wasn't there and that she hadn't come home after visiting us. I showed him photos from the hospital. Then I explained everything. The color drained from his face. His shock seemed genuine, which meant she hadn't even told him. She's been getting worse, he admitted, drinking more than ever. I know, I cut him off. And you keep making excuses for her. He looked away. You're enabling her. And she almost killed my baby yesterday. The words came out sharp, cold, clear. He tried defending her, said she'd been through difficult things that I didn't understand. That was when I lost my temper. I told him exactly what I thought about both of them. And before leaving, I made one thing very clear. If either of them ever came near my family again, I would call the police. His apologies followed me down the hallway, but they meant nothing. Nothing mattered more than my son's safety. When I got home, my husband was holding the baby, thankfully sleeping peacefully. We made the decision immediately. My sister was permanently out of our lives. We blocked her phone number, her social media, her email addresses. We installed a security camera at the front door, and we documented everything that happened in case legal action became necessary. The decision wasn't difficult. Our son's safety was not negotiable. For the next week, we focused only on his recovery, taking turns watching him day and night. Thankfully, he seemed to be recovering well. No obvious lasting effects, and we were finally starting to breathe again. Then my phone exploded with messages from relatives. My sister had posted a crying video online. She was obviously drunk, and she claimed that I was cruelly keeping her away from her nephew out of spite. She described herself as a loving aunt who made one tiny mistake and was now being unfairly punished for it. The video triggered a flood of messages. Family members demanded to know why I was being so harsh, why I couldn't forgive her, why I was treating my own sister this way. Some even suggested I was using the incident as an excuse to continue an old family feud, as if protecting my child was some kind of personal vendetta. I couldn't believe it. She nearly killed my son, disappeared for a week, then came back pretending to be the victim. And when I tried messaging relatives privately with the truth, I discovered she had already gotten to them first. She told everyone that I was exaggerating, that my son had simply taken a small accidental sip from her glass. And somehow, people believed her. Several relatives were now convinced I was overreacting just to punish my sister. What hurt the most wasn't even her lies. It was how quickly people believed them. No one asked for my side. No one wanted details. They just accepted her version of events. And that showed me cracks in my family I had never fully seen before. Then things got even stranger. A few days later, we received an official-looking letter from my sister. According to the letter, she had entered rehab. It claimed her therapist believed family healing was an important part of recovery. And once treatment was complete, she wanted visitation with my son. My husband thought the whole thing sounded suspicious, so we decided to verify it. I called the treatment center listed in the letter. It didn't exist. The address was fake. The facility was fake. Everything about it was fake. I sat there staring at my sleeping son, wondering how my own sister could nearly kill him, stalk us for weeks, and still keep lying to force her way back into our lives. My husband wanted a restraining order. Meanwhile, family members were calling us heartless for not giving her another chance. The stress was becoming unbearable. I never imagined motherhood would involve protecting my child from my own sister. Every parenting book prepared me for sleepless nights, for feeding problems, for sickness. None of them prepared me for this. The next day, I called a friend named Ryan. He worked as a detective and had helped us with small issues before. I explained everything. He came over during lunch and looked through all the evidence we had collected. After reviewing it, he sighed. Look, I'll be honest with you. A restraining order isn't impossible. But judges usually want more than one incident. They want a pattern. I showed him the fake rehab letter, the social media posts, the drunken video she uploaded. His expression became more serious with every new piece of evidence. Document everything, he told us. Every text, every phone call, every social media post. Install cameras if you can. And most importantly, stop communicating with her completely. After he left, I created a separate email account dedicated entirely to documenting my sister's behavior. I saved screenshots, forwarded messages, archived voicemails, and wrote a detailed account of everything that happened with my son while it was still fresh in my memory. My husband installed additional cameras around the house. That same night, the first alert came from our front door camera. I opened the footage expecting a delivery driver. Instead, I saw my sister. She was stumbling up our walkway at almost midnight, completely drunk, holding flowers and a teddy bear. She rang the doorbell over and over, then sat on our porch for nearly 20 minutes. Eventually, she left the gifts behind and wandered away. Once she was gone, my husband went outside and collected them. There was a note attached. "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. Please let me see my nephew. He needs his aunt." The flowers smelled strongly of alcohol and cigarette smoke, like they had come directly from a bar. I added everything to our evidence folder, then threw it all in the trash. The fact that she showed up drunk only proved she hadn't changed at all. The following morning, I called our pediatrician. I warned them that my sister might try accessing my son's medical records. They added extra security notes to his file. Later that day, the clinic called me back. A woman claiming to be my sister had already contacted them. She requested copies of my son's records. When the staff asked for authorization forms, she immediately hung up. My blood ran cold. I called Ryan again. He agreed this helped strengthen our case, but he still didn't think it was enough for an emergency restraining order. Then he suggested something that terrified me: warn future daycare providers. The next day, my husband and I visited the daycare we planned to use when I returned to work. While explaining our situation, the manager's expression slowly changed. Then she hesitated. "Actually, a woman matching your sister's description was here yesterday." My stomach dropped. The manager explained that she claimed she wanted information about enrolling her nephew. She even asked for a tour. We showed her a photo. She confirmed it was definitely my sister. That was the moment I realized how closely she was tracking our lives. I felt physically sick. We immediately crossed that daycare off the list and started looking into private childcare options instead. That weekend, my mother called. She invited us to Sunday dinner. She promised my sister wouldn't be there. She said my parents missed us, and they wanted to spend time with their grandson. After talking it over with my husband, we cautiously agreed. Despite everything, I still wanted my parents to have a relationship with their grandson, at least if they respected our boundaries. We arrived around 4 in the afternoon. My mother greeted us with tears and hugs. My father shook my husband's hand. Everything seemed normal. For a little while, then I heard it. My sister's laugh, coming from the kitchen. My entire body went rigid. "Who else is here?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Before my mother could respond, my sister walked into the room, holding a glass of wine. "Surprise?" she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. I thought we could finally talk things through. I didn't say a single word. I picked up my son, grabbed the diaper bag, and headed straight for the door. Behind me, I could hear my husband telling my parents that trust had been broken. But I was already outside strapping my son into his car seat. My hands were shaking. I drove home. My husband stayed behind to confront my parents. When he came back an hour later, his face said everything. "They planned it," he told me. "They thought if they got everyone in the same room, we'd talk it out and everything would go back to normal." I stared at him. "That's not all, is it?" He shook his head. "No. Megan has been living with them for the last 3 weeks. Apparently her boyfriend had thrown her out after learning what she did to our son." I felt sick. My parents had lied directly to our faces. And while pretending to support us, they had been sheltering the person who nearly killed their own grandson. That night I cried harder than I had in months. Not because of my sister, because of my parents. Because the family I thought I had clearly didn't exist. The next morning I sent them a simple message. "We need space. Please respect that." Then I blocked both of them. My husband did the same. We needed time. Time to process the betrayal. Time to decide what came next. For a few days, things were quiet. My son continued thriving. I tried focusing on motherhood. Tried pushing thoughts of my sister out of my head. My husband returned to work, though he checked on us constantly. Then Thursday happened. I decided to take my son to the grocery store. It was the first trip we'd taken together that wasn't a doctor's appointment. I was finally starting to feel like a normal mother. I placed him safely in the shopping cart and started walking through the store. Everything felt fine, until I got to the produce section. I was picking out apples when I felt it. That unmistakable feeling, like someone was watching me. I turned around, and there she was, at the end of the aisle, pretending to examine oranges, watching me. The moment our eyes met, she looked away. My heart immediately started racing. This wasn't a coincidence. There was no chance it was. This store wasn't near my parents' house. She had followed me. I abandoned my cart immediately, picked up my son, and headed straight for the exit. In the parking lot, I scanned every direction. No sign of her. I quickly buckled my son into the car and drove home, checking the mirrors the entire way. The second I got inside, I had my first panic attack. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought something was wrong with me. I was convinced she was going to appear at any second. I called my husband at work, barely able to speak. He came home immediately, finding me still shaking while our son slept peacefully nearby. "We need legal help," he said. "This is stalking." The next day, we met with Ryan again. This time, he agreed things were escalating. He reviewed everything we had collected, then explained our options. For a restraining order, courts usually want evidence of threats or ongoing harassment. Following you in a grocery store is concerning, but difficult to prove. "So there's nothing we can do?" my husband asked. Ryan shook his head. "I didn't say that. Document everything. Times, dates, locations. Install more cameras. If she keeps appearing wherever you are, that builds your case. And don't respond to her. Any response can be used to argue that contact was welcome. We left with a plan. Not the solution we wanted, but a plan. We would document everything, avoid all contact, and continue building evidence. Over the next week, my sister became even more aggressive. She created new email addresses after we blocked the old ones, sent daily messages about recovery, left voicemails asking for just 5 minutes with my son. At first, the messages sounded sympathetic, but eventually the guilt trip started. I know you're trying to protect him, but do you really want him growing up without knowing the aunt who loves him? Every message became more manipulative than the last. I saved all of them and never replied. Gradually, her tone changed. She stopped begging and started demanding. The messages went from, I understand why you're upset, to, you're being unreasonable. You can't keep him away from me forever. 2 weeks after the grocery store incident, our nanny came to me looking concerned. She told me that while walking with my son through the neighborhood, she noticed the same car circling the block repeatedly, 3 times. She couldn't see who was driving, but something about it felt wrong, so she cut the walk short and came home. At first, she worried she might be overreacting, but after everything she knew about my sister, she didn't want to take any chances. Neither did we. That night, my husband and I made another decision. We were done assuming things couldn't get worse, because every time we thought that, they did. The next day, we ordered a GPS tracker for the stroller. It felt ridiculous. What kind of parent needs a tracker on a baby stroller because of their own sister? But we weren't taking chances anymore. Then another call came, this time from a childhood friend who still occasionally spoke to Megan. I don't want to scare you, she said, but she's been asking strange questions. What kind of questions? She wanted to know when the baby usually naps. She asked if you still keep a spare key hidden outside like your parents used to. A chill ran through me. What did you tell her? Nothing. I told her I had never been to your new house. She said she wanted to leave a surprise for the baby, but something felt wrong. I thanked her and immediately called a locksmith. That same day, we changed every lock, changed alarm codes, checked every window. That night, neither my husband nor I slept much. We took turns checking on our son, listening for noises, watching security footage. Around 2 a.m, my husband shook me awake. There's a car outside. I looked through the blinds. Even in the dark, I recognized it. My sister's car. It was parked across the street. And someone was sitting inside watching our house. My husband threw on a sweatshirt. I'm going out there. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911 if I had to. From the window, I watched him walk toward the car. The headlights suddenly came on, temporarily blinding him. But he kept walking. I could see them talking. Then the car pulled away and disappeared down the street. When he came back inside, I already knew. It was her. He nodded. She claimed she was making sure we were safe. And when I told her I was calling the police, she drove away. The next morning, we brought everything to Ryan. This time, he agreed. We finally had enough. We filed for a temporary restraining order, and within hours, it was approved. My sister was legally forbidden from coming near us, near our home, near our son's doctor. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small sense of relief. And for about a week, things were quiet. No messages, no suspicious cars, no surprise visits, no sightings. We started relaxing, just a little. Then I found something that terrified me. One evening, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I found an account dedicated entirely to my son. The account used his photos she had taken from my Facebook page. There were dozens of them. Captions talked about her precious nephew, about how fast he was growing, about future memories they would make together. I kept digging and found more accounts, several of them. Different platforms, different names, all pretending she had a close relationship with my child. One account even contained completely fabricated stories about babysitting him. Stories that never happened. Photos stolen from our pages. I spent hours reporting every account, changing privacy settings, locking everything down. My husband contacted Ryan immediately. But technically she hadn't contacted us directly, so it wasn't considered a violation of the restraining order. The stress was destroying us. Neither of us slept properly. Neither of us relaxed. We were constantly looking over our shoulders. Eventually, my husband suggested therapy. At first, I resisted. Then I realized I was living in a permanent state of fear. So we found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and scheduled an appointment. During our first session, we explained everything, from the alcohol poisoning, to the stalking, to the fake accounts. The therapist reassured us that our reactions were normal, given everything we had experienced. Halfway through the appointment, my husband's phone rang. He silenced it, then looked at the screen. His face immediately went pale. It's our neighbor, he answered, listened for a few seconds, then stood up. We need to go. What happened? Someone broke into our house. We rushed home. 2 police officers were already there. Our neighbor had called after noticing a side door standing open. The officers had searched the property. No one was inside. Nothing appeared stolen. Electronics were untouched. Jewelry untouched. Everything looked normal, until we reached the nursery. The moment I walked in, I froze. On the changing table sat a large gift basket, wrapped neatly with a ribbon. Inside were baby clothes, toys, and a card signed, Love, Aunt Megan. But something was wrong. I stepped closer and immediately smelled wine. My husband carefully opened the basket. Every piece of clothing inside was soaked in red wine. The note read, "Since you won't let me see him, I thought I'd send him something to remember me by." Blood is thicker than water, but wine leaves a stronger stain. I felt sick. The police photographed everything, collected the basket, added it to our case file. But because nothing had technically been stolen and she was already gone, there wasn't much else they could do. After they left, My husband and I sat in silence. The break-in felt different. This wasn't harassment anymore. It felt personal, calculated. The wine-soaked clothes weren't an apology. They were a message, a reminder of what she had done, and proof that she wasn't sorry at all. That's when I finally said it. We can't stay here. My husband looked at me and slowly nodded, because for the first time, neither of us felt safe in our own home anymore. Next morning, we packed everything we needed. Clothes, baby supplies, documents, anything important. Then we left. My husband's parents lived in a gated community in another town. We told almost no one where we were going. Not friends, not relatives, not even people we trusted. At that point, we were afraid any information could somehow find its way back to Megan. His parents welcomed us immediately. They converted a spare room into a nursery for our son. And unlike my family, they took the situation seriously. For the first time in months, I felt a little safer. The neighborhood was quiet, the gates were monitored, there were cameras everywhere. And for the first 3 nights, I actually slept through the night. No checking windows, no reviewing security footage, no waking up every hour. Even my son seemed happier. He smiled more, cried less. The entire atmosphere felt different. Then on the 4th day, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message was only 4 words. Nice place, peaceful garden. My blood went cold. I showed my husband. He immediately went outside and searched the neighborhood. Nothing. No sign of her. But the message was enough. She had found us again. My father-in-law had worked in security for years. The moment he saw the message, he switched into professional mode. He walked us through safety procedures, told us to change routines, take different routes, avoid posting anything online, never become predictable. We followed every piece of advice, and somehow she still kept finding ways to reach us. Soon she somehow got my in-laws' phone numbers. Then she started calling them, telling dramatic stories about how I was keeping her from her only nephew. When that didn't work, she moved on to extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had never even met her. We spent weeks explaining why a stranger was contacting everyone about our child. Meanwhile, the court hearing for the permanent restraining order was getting closer. We gathered everything: hospital records, police reports, photos, security footage, screenshots, witness statements, every piece of evidence we had. Ryan believed we had a strong case. Then the day before court, we learned Megan had hired a lawyer, and not just any lawyer, a very expensive one. Someone known for aggressive courtroom tactics. I had no idea how she could afford him. But suddenly everything felt much more serious. The day of the hearing, I told the judge everything. How she gave alcohol to my son, how she stalked us, how she broke into our home, how she continued harassing us. I stayed calm, stuck to facts, presented evidence, and hoped it would be enough. Then her lawyer stood up and painted a completely different picture. According to him, Megan was simply a struggling alcoholic, a woman who made one terrible mistake, a woman desperately trying to recover. He claimed I had always exaggerated her behavior, that I was using childhood resentment as an excuse to cut her off forever. Then he presented documents showing she had entered treatment and argued that reconnecting with family was important for recovery. The judge listened to both sides, asked questions, reviewed evidence, then announced he needed more time. The temporary restraining order would stay in place, but the final decision would come later. Another month of uncertainty. As we left the courthouse, I saw my mother waiting outside. She looked exhausted, older somehow. She approached slowly. "Can we talk?" I didn't want to, but I stopped. "Megan says she's suicidal." Those were her first words. No apology, no concern for my son, just Megan. She says losing her family is destroying her. "Can't you drop this restraining order? We can help her together." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Mom, she poisoned my baby. She stalked us. She broke into our house. And you're asking me to feel sorry for her?" My mother looked down. "We're trying to help both our daughters." Then something suddenly clicked, a thought I hadn't considered before. "How did she find us?" I asked. "At my husband's parents' house." My mother's face changed immediately, and I already knew the answer. "I might have mentioned where you were staying." So the words hit me like a punch. She had done it. My own mother had given away our location, then stood in front of me pretending she cared about our safety. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to cry. "We're done." I turned around, walked away, and got into the car. On the drive home, I told my husband everything, and together we made another decision. We cut contact with my parents too, at least for now, because they had proven they couldn't be trusted, not even with something as simple as keeping our location private. That evening, my mother-in-law handed me an envelope. Someone had dropped it off while we were in court. Inside was a handwritten letter from Megan's ex-boyfriend. He explained that he had finally ended the relationship, not because of the drinking, because of the obsession. According to him, she spent hours talking about my son. Hours. She had an entire wall covered with printed photos of him, pictures taken from social media, pictures collected over months, and he was genuinely afraid of what she might do next. When I finished reading, my hands were shaking. For the first time, someone outside our family was confirming exactly what we feared. This wasn't just addiction anymore. Something else was happening. Something much darker. And for the first time, even the police started taking our concerns more seriously. The night before the next court hearing, the security system at my husband's parents' house triggered an alert. The cameras showed someone climbing the backyard fence. The alarm activated automatically, and the person immediately ran. But not before the cameras captured her face. It was Megan. Clear as day. For the first time, we had undeniable proof that she was violating the restraining order. The next morning, we returned to court. This time the judge reviewed everything: the original evidence, the stalking, the fake accounts, the break-in, the new footage from the fence. Megan looked different, calm, composed, wearing a conservative dress, minimal makeup, eyes lowered. Her lawyer presented a new narrative. According to him, she had accepted responsibility, she was actively seeking treatment, and deserved the opportunity to rebuild her life. When it was my turn to speak, I focused on the facts, but I couldn't completely hide my emotions. I told the court what our lives had become, how I checked my son's breathing every night, how I couldn't go to a grocery store without looking over my shoulder, how my family had been forced out of our own home. This isn't about punishment. It's about protection. The judge listened carefully, then reviewed the newest footage again. A few minutes later, he made his decision. The permanent restraining order was granted immediately. Megan was ordered to stay at least 1,000 feet away from me. My husband, my son, our homes, our workplaces, everything. For the first time in months, I felt relief. Real relief. Unfortunately, it lasted only a few hours. That evening, an email arrived from a brand new address. No piece of paper will keep me away from what's mine. Blood doesn't disappear because a judge says so. My stomach dropped. She had violated the order almost immediately. We forwarded the email to Ryan and the police. Officers went to her apartment, but she was already gone. She had moved out days earlier. What they found inside was horrifying. The apartment was filled with empty alcohol bottles. There were photos of my son everywhere, dozens of them. Some taken from social media, others clearly taken through windows or from a distance. There were maps, notes, schedules, records of nap times, records of our routines. The moment I heard that, I felt physically sick. An alert was issued for her arrest, but nobody knew where she was. And that uncertainty terrified us. Not knowing where she might appear next meant we couldn't relax for even a second. We stayed with my husband's parents. The gated community felt safer than our own house. At least there were cameras, security guards, locked entrances. 3 tense days passed. No messages, no sightings, nothing. For the first time, we started hoping she had left the area. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe she had given up. Maybe she had disappeared. Then everything changed again. On the 4th day, our nanny took my son to the neighborhood park. My mother-in-law went with her. It was the first quiet hour I'd had in weeks. I was finally taking a shower, drying my hair, trying to feel normal. Then my phone rang. It was the nanny. Her voice was tight, controlled, terrified. "I think I just saw your sister." My heart immediately started pounding. "Where are you?" "At the park. She's been following us for about 20 minutes, keeping her distance. But I'm sure it's her." I grabbed my keys. My hands were shaking. "Stay together. I'm calling the police." Then I called my husband. He ran out the door before I even finished explaining. After that, I dialed 911. The dispatcher confirmed officers were already being sent. From the living room window, I watched my husband's car fly out of the driveway. Then all I could do was wait. 5 minutes felt like an hour. Finally, my phone rang again. My husband. "We have Jackson. We're coming home. What happened?" The security guard stopped her. She tried to run when she saw me, but she didn't make it far. "The police have her." I collapsed onto the couch. The relief hit me so hard I could barely breathe. A few minutes later, they walked through the door. I immediately took my son into my arms, held him tightly, and cried. For the first time in weeks, I actually believed we might be safe. Later that night, an officer called to confirm everything. Megan had been arrested. She would remain in custody until a bail hearing, and because she had repeatedly violated court orders, there was a good chance she would stay there for a while. That night, I slept. Really slept. For the first time in months. The next morning, my husband and I started discussing the future. Would we ever return home? Should we move? Could we trust my parents again? What would happen at family gatherings? We had more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Our lives would never be the same. Everything had changed because of Megan, and we would never again take our family's safety for granted. Whatever happened next, whether she stayed in jail, whether she got released, whether she disappeared, our son's safety would remain the only priority. That evening, while we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I asked my husband a question. "Do you think she'll ever understand what she did?" He thought about it for a moment, then shook his head. "I don't know. But that's not our job. Our job is protecting our son, and that's exactly what we're going to do." I nodded and leaned against his shoulder. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. But for the first time since the day my sister gave alcohol to my baby, I felt like we might actually survive this. The bail hearing was scheduled for the next morning. My husband insisted on attending. He wanted to make sure the judge fully understood how serious everything had become. His mother stayed with me and our son. I wasn't ready to see Megan again. Not yet. When my husband returned a few hours later, his expression was complicated. Part relief, part concern. "She got bail." My stomach sank. "But there are conditions." He sat down beside me. "She has to wear an ankle monitor. She has mandatory alcohol testing, regular evaluations, and she still can't come within 1,000 feet of us." "How did she look?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Her lawyer did most of the talking. She just sat there." The only time she reacted was when they mentioned alcohol monitoring. That didn't surprise me. Even after everything, even after almost losing her freedom, alcohol still seemed to be the most important thing in her life. We decided to stay with my husband's parents longer. Neither of us trusted an ankle monitor to keep us safe. Our son seemed happy there anyway. His grandparents adored him, and the extra help gave us room to breathe. A couple of weeks later, Ryan called with new information. As part of her bail requirements, Megan had undergone a full psychological evaluation. The results revealed more than alcoholism. There were concerns about deeper mental health issues that might explain her fixation on my son. The court ordered additional treatment, not just for addiction, but for her mental health as well. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me felt validated. Professionals were finally acknowledging what we'd been saying all along. This wasn't just drinking. Something else had been wrong. But another part of me didn't care. A diagnosis didn't erase what happened. It didn't undo the fear, and it certainly didn't rebuild trust. About a month later, we received a letter through her treatment team. Her therapist wanted to arrange a supervised family session. Participation was completely voluntary. The meeting would take place in a controlled therapeutic environment. My husband and I discussed it with our own therapist. He strongly advised caution. Megan needs to demonstrate long-term stability first, and even then, any contact should begin with adults only. Not your son. That matched exactly how I felt, so we declined, politely, firmly. To my surprise, her therapist accepted our decision without argument. They simply continued working with her and promised not to push. Around the same time, my parents tried reaching out again, this time through my husband's phone. My father admitted they had been making excuses for Megan for years. My mother admitted they should have intervened much earlier. They said they finally understood the damage they had caused. Maybe they were sincere. Maybe they weren't. At that point, I honestly didn't know. All I knew was that protecting my son came before everyone else's feelings, including theirs. Eventually, I agreed to one small compromise. They could receive occasional updates about their grandson. Nothing more. No visits, no personal information. And if anything was shared with Megan, communication would end immediately. Then something unexpected happened. Months passed, quietly. According to reports from her treatment program, Megan was complying with everything. Therapy, testing, sobriety requirements, court orders, no violations, no surprise visits, no stalking, nothing. For the first time in a very long time, life started feeling normal again. We eventually moved back into our own home, though we upgraded security so much that it looked more like a government building than a family house. Then one day another letter arrived. This one was different. There were no excuses, no manipulation, no guilt trips, no requests. She acknowledged exactly what she had done. She apologized for giving alcohol to my son, for stalking us, for violating boundaries, for everything. And she didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask to see him. She simply accepted responsibility. I read the letter several times, looking for hidden motives, looking for signs of manipulation. I couldn't find any. Still, I wasn't ready to respond. Not yet. So we acknowledged receiving it through her therapist and left it at that. Over time, more updates came. Each one suggested real progress, long-term sobriety, consistent therapy, improved understanding of boundaries. I remained cautious, because trust wasn't something she could earn back in a few months. It would take years, and even then, I wasn't sure. Eventually, we agreed on one condition: no direct contact until she demonstrated at least a full year of stability. It was a hard boundary, and my husband supported it completely. Some relatives called us stubborn, but those relatives hadn't lived through what we had. They hadn't watched their infant get rushed to the hospital. They hadn't spent months looking over their shoulders. They hadn't feared their own family. 14 months after Megan's arrest, her therapist contacted us again, this time proposing a carefully supervised meeting. Just adults, no children. Even the thought of seeing her made my anxiety spike. But my husband suggested a compromise, a video call. If anything felt wrong, we could end it immediately. So we agreed and scheduled the session. When Megan appeared on the screen, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked healthier. Her skin was clearer. Her eyes were focused. The bloated appearance that had always followed her drinking was gone. For a moment, I just stared. Then she spoke. Thank you for agreeing to this. For the next hour, she talked openly about recovery, about therapy, about addiction, about the obsession she had developed with my son. For the first time, she didn't make excuses. She didn't blame alcohol. She didn't blame childhood trauma. She blamed herself. I was trying to fill something empty inside me. When you got pregnant, I convinced myself that becoming an aunt would give my life meaning. And when you cut me off, the obsession only got worse. I listened carefully, every word, every pause, trying to decide whether I believed her. Toward the end of the session, she looked directly at me. I hope one day I can have some role in his life. But I understand if that never happens. That statement immediately triggered every protective instinct I had. So I answered honestly, I'm glad you're getting help, but I need you to understand something. Access to my son is not on the table. Any relationship we rebuild will be between us, not between you and him. To my surprise, she nodded. No arguing, no guilt trips, no tears. I understand. That's fair. After that first meeting, we agreed to a few more video sessions. Slowly, carefully, always supervised. Over the next 2 months, she remained consistent. The same accountability, the same boundaries, the same willingness to accept responsibility. Eventually, we agreed to meet in person. The session took place at her therapist's office. When Megan arrived, she was carrying a gift bag. Immediately, my body tensed. Every memory of the wine-soaked baby clothes came rushing back. She noticed my reaction instantly. This is for Jackson. We discussed no gifts. I cut her off. For a split second, I waited for an argument. Instead, she nodded. You're right. I'm sorry. Then she set the bag aside without another word. That moment impressed me more than any apology ever could, because for once, she respected a boundary immediately. Throughout the session, she focused entirely on making amends. Not on seeing my son, not on gaining access, not on convincing us, just accountability. When my parents learned we were meeting with her, they immediately started pushing for reconciliation. It's been almost 2 years. My mother sounded frustrated. She's done everything the court asked. Everything her doctors asked. How much longer does she have to wait? I answered without hesitation. As long as it takes. Trust takes years. Not months. The conversation ended quickly after that. Eventually, my parents stopped pushing, maybe because they finally understood, or maybe because they realized pressure only pushed us further away. By the second year of Megan's recovery, we had established something resembling a relationship. A distant one, a cautious one, but a relationship. She attended some family gatherings, only under strict conditions. She remained completely sober. She was never alone with my son, and she accepted those rules without complaint. Meanwhile, I continued therapy. Because although Megan was changing, the damage she caused hadn't disappeared. I still checked locks repeatedly. I still jumped at unexpected sounds. I still watched her carefully whenever she was near my child. My therapist reminded me constantly that trust wasn't owed. It had to be earned. That idea helped more than anything, because it allowed me to accept her progress without forcing myself to forgive before I was ready. Slowly, I learned something important. Trusting someone again doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means acknowledging reality while still protecting yourself. When my son turned 4, we held a birthday party at a local park. Family came, a few close friends came, and Megan came too. By then, she had nearly 3 years of sobriety. Before giving my son a gift, she showed it to me first. A dinosaur book, his current obsession. I approved it, and she handed it over. Simple, respectful, no drama. Later during the party, I noticed her sitting alone on a bench, away from everyone else. I walked over. Everything okay? She smiled slightly. Yeah, just taking a minute. Then she glanced toward the picnic tables. Several adults were drinking beer and wine. These situations can still be difficult sometimes. I hadn't even considered that. Do you want to leave? She shook her head. No, I have tools now. Then she looked at me. Actually, today is 3 years sober. I blinked, then smiled. Congratulations. That's huge. She nodded. It's not why I brought it up. I just wanted to thank you. I stared at her. For what? For holding your boundaries. If you had given in, if you had let me back in easily, I probably never would have gotten help. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then I nodded. I'm glad you're doing better. And for the first time in years, I genuinely meant it. As I walked back toward the party, I realized something. We were never going to be the sisters I imagined when I was a child. That relationship was gone, maybe forever. But what existed now was something different. Something built on accountability, boundaries, consequences, and hard-earned respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Last week, Megan celebrated 4 years of sobriety. She moved to a nearby town and started working in addiction counseling, using her own experience to help people facing the same struggles she once faced. She maintained appropriate boundaries, always asking permission before sending gifts, always checking before birthdays and holidays, never assuming access, never demanding anything. Most importantly, she never again asked for unsupervised time with my son, and she never questioned our parenting decisions. Sometimes during family gatherings, I would watch her interact with him from across the room. He would show her a Lego creation, or tell her about something he learned at school, and she would respond appropriately, interested, kind, but careful. In those moments, I felt complicated emotions, relief, sadness, caution, and sometimes even gratitude, not because everything had been fixed, because it hadn't, but because she had actually done the work. My son knows only a simplified version of what happened. We've told him that Aunt Megan was very sick when he was little, that she made dangerous choices, and that she needed help before she could be part of family events again. Children have a way of accepting complicated truths in simple ways. He neither fears her, nor feels particularly attached to her. To him, she's simply Aunt Megan. To me, things are more complicated. I don't think I'll ever completely relax when she's around him. I still notice where she is. I still pay attention. I still find myself moving a little closer whenever they're in the same area. But the overwhelming fear is gone. What remains is caution, manageable caution, the kind that comes from experience. A while ago, my husband and I started discussing another child. The conversation brought back memories I wasn't expecting. Memories of hospitals, police reports, security cameras, court hearings. For a moment, I wondered if fear had permanently changed me. Then my husband reached across the table and took my hand. We're not the same people we were back then. He was right. We were stronger, more prepared, better at protecting our family. We can't let the past control our future. And slowly I realized he was right about that too. Fear had protected us when we needed it, but it couldn't be allowed to run our lives forever. I still keep the letter Megan wrote during treatment, partly as a reminder, partly as evidence, and partly because it represents something I never expected to see. Genuine accountability. Trust, once broken, never returns exactly the way it was before. That's just reality. But life keeps moving. Families change. Relationships evolve. Ours certainly did. It looks nothing like I imagined when I was younger. It was shaped by addiction, fear, betrayal, and years of consequences. But somehow we survived it. Sometimes people ask whether I've forgiven my sister. The truth is, I don't really know how to answer that. Forgiveness is a complicated word. Some people think it means forgetting. Others think it means moving on. For me, it means accepting reality. I accept what happened. I accept the work she's done. I accept the person she's become. But I'll never forget what happened to my son. And I don't think I should. Instead of forgiveness, I found something else. Peace. Not complete peace, not perfect peace. Just enough. Enough to move forward. Enough to stop looking over my shoulder every minute. Enough to enjoy my life again. The biggest lesson I learned from all of this is simple. You do not owe anyone access to your child. Not parents, not siblings, not relatives, not anyone. A relationship with your child is a privilege, not a right, and anyone who puts that child's safety at risk can lose that privilege forever, no matter who they are. As for Megan, I truly hope her recovery continues. I hope she keeps helping people, I hope she stays healthy, and I hope the progress she's made lasts. But my priorities haven't changed. My responsibility is to my family, to my husband, to my children, and to creating a safe home for them. That's not a fairy tale ending. It's a real one. Messy, complicated, imperfect, but real. And sometimes real life is the best ending you're going to get. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's to trust my instincts. I knew my sister had serious problems, but I let family pressure convince me to ignore those instincts. Never again. My children's safety will always come first, no matter who disagrees, no matter who gets offended, no matter what anyone says. Because at the end of the day, my job isn't to keep everyone happy. My job is to protect my family, and that's exactly what I'll keep doing.